70% of our planet is a sunken museum of lost human history. The ocean floor holds the remnants of entire societies, master seafarers who built a global network thousands of years before satellites connected our world. This journey through lost maritime civilizations will completely reshape your understanding of our past. We are about to trace a forgotten web of trade and culture, from mysterious Mediterranean empires to a phantom continent in Southeast Asia. Why did these advanced societies vanish beneath the waves, and could their fate hold a silent warning for our own coastal cities today? By the end, you will see the map of human history not as solid land, but as a fluid, interconnected story written across the seas. What forgotten world lies hidden just below the surface of your own imagination? A vibrant fresco from the ancient city of Akrotiri shows ships with colorful sails gliding across a brilliant blue sea. This single image is a window into the world of the Minoans, a society that mastered the Mediterranean long before the rise of classical Greece. Their civilization, centered on the island of Crete, was not built on conquering vast lands, but on controlling the sea lanes. Historians call this a thalassocracy, a sea empire. This was the first major maritime network in Europe, a web of trade that stretched for thousands of miles. Minoan ships carried exquisite pottery, precious saffron, and the vital metal of the age, copper, connecting cultures from Egypt to Anatolia. Their sophisticated palaces, like Knossos, were the beating hearts of this maritime economy. Then, around the year 1450 before the Common Era, their world shattered. The colossal eruption of the Thera volcano, one of the largest in human history, is believed to have triggered immense tidal waves and a volcanic winter. The Minoan fleet, the source of their power, was likely decimated and their trade network collapsed. This created a power vacuum on the water, an emptiness that new forces were eager to fill. From the chaos emerged the Enigmatic Sea Peoples, a confederation of maritime raiders. Egyptian temple walls are carved with their story, depicting fierce naval battles where these invaders attacked the mighty Egyptian empire itself. Their widespread assaults are considered a key factor in the late Bronze Age collapse, a tumultuous period when numerous great kingdoms fell. But who were they? Were they displaced Minoans taking to raiding after losing their homes, or were they a new wave of migrants from the Western Mediterranean, drawn eastward by the crumbling of established powers? Their true identity remains one of history's most enduring puzzles. This cycle of maritime empire and catastrophic downfall shows us the double-edged nature of the sea. The same networks that built the Minoan world could also carry the forces that would dismantle it. To grasp the full scope of these lost connections, we must voyage beyond the familiar waters of the Mediterranean. While the Sea Peoples were reshaping the Mediterranean, a far greater transformation was unfolding on the opposite side of the globe. A vast, low-lying continent once connected the islands of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Borneo. During the last ice age, this real landscape, known to scientists as Sundaland, was a sprawling subcontinent, its plains crossed by rivers and fringed by rich coastlines. Early human populations thrived here, developing the first sophisticated maritime technologies to navigate its intricate waterways. Then the world warmed. Between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, as the great glaciers melted, the oceans began their relentless rise. The waters did not come as a single wave, but as a slow, inexorable creep that swallowed this world over generations. Entire ecosystems and the lands people called home vanished forever beneath the sea, forcing mass migrations that scattered cultures across Southeast Asia and Oceania. The oral histories of many indigenous groups in the region, stories of a great flood that consumed the land, may be distant but powerful echoes of this catastrophic, real-world event. Yet, this monumental loss also sparked a new chapter of human ingenuity. The submergence of their homeland likely compelled the survivors to master the open ocean, spurring the development of the incredible Austronesian seafaring culture. These were the descendants of the Sundaland diaspora, the people who would perfect the outrigger canoe and navigate by the stars to achieve the impossible. They would eventually colonize a realm stretching from Madagascar all the way to the most remote islands of the Pacific. This profound story demonstrates a recurring theme of the seas, that environmental change can simultaneously erase one world and force the birth of another, often pushing humanity to achieve wonders it never thought possible. Our journey now sails eastward to where another lost world, built by a people of immense power and mystery, awaits discovery beneath the waves of the Pacific. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, the ocean floor holds a structure that seems to defy simple explanation. Looming from the deep are immense terraces with sharp, 90-degree angles, towering pillars, and what look like vast, carved staircases leading into the abyss. Since its discovery in the 1980s, this colossal formation has divided archaeologists and geologists. Is the Yonaguni monument a masterpiece of natural erosion, or is it the sunken ruin of a civilization lost to time? Those who argue for human hands point to features that feel undeniably intentional. There are perfectly straight, parallel channels that look like ancient roadways, and two massive, pillar-like stones standing side by side, an arrangement that seems too deliberate to be random. The most striking element might be a large, flat rock face that eerily resembles a humanoid face, its features weathered but distinct. If this structure is indeed artificial, its origins would be almost unbelievably ancient. It would have been constructed when sea levels were dramatically lower, over 10,000 years ago, a time when our ancestors were supposedly simple hunter-gatherers. This would rewrite the history books, suggesting a sophisticated, seafaring culture in the Pacific with advanced stonemasonry skills, a society whose very existence has been erased by the rising waters. Skeptics, however, offer a compelling counter-argument. They note that the rock here is sandstone, a material that naturally fractures along straight planes due to tectonic stresses. Powerful currents in the area could have then sculpted these blocks over millennia, creating a spectacular but entirely natural geological spectacle. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is a middle path, that the site began as a remarkable natural formation, but was later recognized and modified by ancient peoples. It could have been a sacred place, a ceremonial center on a promontory overlooking a prehistoric coastline, later claimed by the sea as the glaciers melted. This enigma, resting in the clear Pacific waters, forces us to question the very timeline of human ingenuity. It suggests that the waves may have swallowed chapters of our story far older and more complex than we ever believed. And as we leave the Pacific, another legendary sunken city calls from the depths of another ocean, a place of gold and myth that has captivated explorers for centuries. The Legend of Dwarka seemed like a story too grand to be true, a city of gold and gates that vanished into the ocean. Yet, where myth spoke of a divine kingdom sinking, the waters off India's coast now whisper a different tale. Marine archaeologists have mapped a sunken world there, a sprawling complex of stone blocks, weathered pillars, and ancient pottery resting on the seabed. These are not the stuff of fantasy, but the tangible foundations of a major port city that thrived over 3,000 years ago. The layout is strikingly deliberate, with a clear outline of a jetty and harbor works, evidence of a settlement designed for trade. This was a hub, a place that connected the Indian subcontinent to distant civilizations like Mesopotamia. The discovery offers a profound shift in understanding, suggesting the epic Mahabharata may preserve the memory of a real maritime power, a society whose achievements were so monumental they lived on in legend long after the city was gone. The submergence of this port likely resulted from the slow, relentless rise of sea levels combined with shifts in the local landscape, a gradual process that transformed a center of commerce into a story of a city reclaimed by the sea. This incredible find blurs the line between ancient story and archaeological fact, proving that some myths are simply history waiting to be rediscovered. From this legendary sunken port in the east, our journey continues to a lost world in the west, where another civilization mastered the waters only to fade into silence. Long before the arrival of European metals, a different kind of treasure fueled a continent-wide exchange. On the rugged shores of Lake Superior, ancient miners dug deep pits, using heavy hammerstones to extract a unique resource, pure, malleable copper that occurred naturally in the earth. This was the work of the Old Copper Complex, a culture that began its large-scale operations over 8,000 years ago. They were not seeking ornamental wealth, but a practical and revolutionary material. This copper was meticulously shaped into essential tools, efficient projectile points, and items of deep cultural meaning. The true marvel, however, was the network that grew around it. These heavy ingots and finished artifacts did not stay local. They traveled thousands of miles, with finds documented from the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic coast. Such a vast distribution points to a complex intercontinental trade system, one that functioned for millennia. How did they move such heavy cargo across such immense distances? The answer lies on the water. The Great Lakes and the continent's great river systems formed a natural aquatic highway. It is believed these early traders used sturdy canoes to transport their valuable loads, mastering inland maritime routes to connect distant cultures. This was North America's first metal age, a sophisticated economy built on waterborne trade. Then, mysteriously, around 3,000 years ago, this large-scale production and long-distance exchange began to fade. The culture shifted, with communities turning to smaller, more localized tools. What could cause the collapse of such an established network? Researchers have proposed several possibilities. A shift in climate may have disrupted trade routes or resource availability. Perhaps the most accessible copper deposits were eventually depleted, or maybe social changes made the intensive mining process less desirable. Whatever the reason, the legacy of these ancient traders is undeniable. They created a web of connection that spanned a continent, demonstrating that sophisticated maritime commerce existed in the Americas far earlier than once believed. This pattern of a lost, water-linked civilization is one that appears across the globe, and perhaps the most compelling example of all lies in a place whose very existence was once dismissed as pure fantasy. The grandeur of Knossos was not built on conquest but on commerce. Its multi-story palaces buzzing with a sophistication Europe would not see again for 1,000 years. Advanced plumbing systems channeled water through the complex, while vibrant frescoes depicted a society in harmony with the sea. Their unique hieroglyphic script, still largely undeciphered, hints at a complex administration managing a vast economic network. This was a thalassocracy, an empire of the waves, where power was projected not by walls but by the sleek, oared ships that patrolled the trade routes. These vessels were the lifeblood of their society, carrying exquisite Cretan pottery, fine olive oil, and rich wines to the ports of Egypt and the Levant. In return, they brought back ivory, precious gold, and other luxuries that fueled the Minoan elite. The remarkable absence of defensive fortifications around their great centers suggests a profound confidence, a peace maintained by the sheer strength of their fleet, a pax minoica that secured their island home. This golden age, however, was living on borrowed time. The colossal volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini, was an event of almost unimaginable scale. It did not just bury a local settlement, it sent tsunamis crashing across the Aegean and pumped vast amounts of ash into the atmosphere, potentially triggering a period of global cooling. The Minoan fleet, the very source of their security and wealth, was likely devastated in the harbors. Their trade networks collapsed, and their society, weakened and isolated, became vulnerable. From the Greek mainland, the more militaristic Mycenaeans saw an opportunity, eventually moving in to occupy Crete and absorb what remained of its culture. The Minoan story is a powerful lesson in maritime dependency, showing how a civilization that lives by the sea can also fall by the changes the sea brings. This cycle of a sophisticated culture vanishing beneath the waves would echo far beyond the Mediterranean, leading us to the edge of the world and a legend that has refused to die. Plato's story of Atlantis stands apart, not merely as a myth but as a fully formed cautionary tale. In his dialogues, he describes a formidable naval power, an island nation of immense wealth and advanced engineering that angered the gods with its pride and was swallowed by the sea in one terrible day and night. He framed it as a lesson on the dangers of hubris, yet the details feel too vivid, too specific to be pure invention. This has led generations to ask a compelling question. Was Atlantis a philosophical device, or could it be a distorted echo of a real catastrophe? The most plausible candidate lies close to Plato's own world. The Minoan civilization, with its sudden demise linked to the Thera eruption, fits the narrative remarkably well. A sophisticated island culture, a master of the sea, brought low by a natural cataclysm that could easily be remembered as a single, devastating event. Alternatively, some researchers point to the slow submergence of landmasses like Doggerland in the North Sea, or even the flooding of the Black Sea basin, as potential seeds for the story. The legend of a great flood that destroys a powerful society is not unique to Greece. It appears in countless cultures worldwide, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to flood stories among indigenous peoples of the Americas. This recurrence hints at a shared, ancient memory of rising seas consuming coastal settlements, a trauma passed down through generations. Geologically, a continent-sized landmass sinking into the Atlantic Ocean is impossible, but the persistence of the Atlantis myth speaks to something deeper than literal history. It embodies our profound awe of the ocean and a universal anxiety about the stability of our own world. In this way, Atlantis is the archetype of every lost maritime civilization, a powerful symbol of human achievement and its stunning fragility. This enduring search for a sunken world naturally draws our gaze to other legendary lands, places like Lemuria or Mu, whose stories beckon from the deep. The scientific search for a lost continent began with a puzzle written in stone and bone. In the 1800s, naturalists were baffled. They had found fossils of lemurs in both India and Madagascar, but nowhere in between. To explain this, they proposed a radical idea, a vast sunken land bridge they named Lemuria, which they believed had once connected these now separate shores. Around the same time, an eccentric writer named Augustus Le Plongeon claimed to have deciphered ancient Mayan texts. He announced the discovery of a different sunken realm, a Pacific civilization called Mu, which he said was the motherland of all world cultures. We now understand, through the science of plate tectonics, that continents do not sink in the manner or the time frame these stories describe. The solid ground of our planet shifts and drifts over millions of years. It does not simply vanish beneath the waves in a human lifetime. Yet the persistent power of these legends cannot be so easily dismissed. They feel like cultural echoes, a deep, resonant memory of a real and traumatic event, the great flooding that followed the last ice age. The slow, inexorable rise of the oceans did drown vast, habitable landscapes, like the Sundaland Shelf in Southeast Asia and the Sahul Shelf that once connected Australia to New Guinea. For the people living on those coastal plains, it was not a myth, it was a generational reality, a slow retreat from waters that consumed their world. The stories of Mu and Lemuria, though scientifically inaccurate, may therefore be distant but powerful reflections of these true historical displacements. They remind us that the oral traditions of coastal peoples are not mere fables, but often contain encoded histories of migration, loss, and adaptation in the face of a changing world. These legends are a form of cultural memory, waiting for us to learn their language. From these speculative lost continents, our journey turns to a very real and tangible lost civilization, one that left behind colossal stone heads as its unmistakable calling card. The colossal stone heads of the Olmec gaze inland from the Gulf Coast of Mexico, their stern expressions carved from basalt, yet their true story may be written on the water. Known as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmec are famous for their sprawling ceremonial centers and monumental art, but their mastery of river and sea has often been overlooked. These were not just land-based farmers and priests, they were skilled navigators who understood that water was the ultimate highway. Their great city of La Venta was strategically positioned in a network of navigable rivers, a hub designed to receive and distribute goods from across the region. This was the heart of a thriving trade network, one that moved far more than simple commodities. Canoes laden with precious blue jade from distant Guatemala, dark volcanic obsidian for tools and ritual, and the sacred seeds of the cacao tree traveled these liquid routes. The very scale of their most famous creations hints at their maritime prowess. Those immense stone heads, weighing many tons, were quarried from mountains dozens of miles away. Transporting such massive objects overland through swampy jungle would have been a near impossible task. The most logical explanation is that they were moved on enormous, specially built rafts, floated down rivers and along the coast to their final resting places. This hidden maritime network was the circulatory system of Olmec culture, pumping not just goods but ideas, artistic styles, and religious concepts throughout Mesoamerica. Their influence, carried on the currents, would eventually provide the foundational beliefs for the Maya and the Aztecs. It is a powerful reminder that even the most apparently land-based empires were often built on hidden waterways. This pattern of a civilization connected by the sea was not unique to the Americas, as a similar story was unfolding across the Atlantic, where a people of immense mystery left their own mark on the waves. While the Olmec moved ideas across the Gulf of Mexico, a different kind of maritime power was stitching together the entire Mediterranean. The Phoenicians were not conquerors of land, but masters of commerce, their influence flowing through a network of coastal city-states and distant trading posts. Ancient texts speak of a legendary port called Tarshish, a source of almost mythical wealth in silver and the most vital metal of the age, tin. The exact location of Tarshish remains one of history's great puzzles, with scholars debating whether it was in southern Spain, on the island of Sardinia, or somewhere even farther afield. Wherever it was, its name was synonymous with the farthest reaches of the known world. The Phoenician quest for tin was driven by a simple, powerful necessity. Bronze, the alloy that defined an entire era, is made from copper and tin. While copper was relatively common around the Mediterranean, tin was extraordinarily rare. To control the bronze trade was to hold the key to military and economic power. This necessity bred one of the ancient world's most astounding achievements, a secret maritime highway stretching all the way to the tin-rich mines of Cornwall in Britain. Imagine the sheer audacity of that voyage. Phoenician ships, sturdy vessels powered by both sail and oar, had to pass through the Pillars of Hercules, the modern Strait of Gibraltar. To the cultures of the Mediterranean, this was the edge of the world, the gateway to a terrifying and unknown ocean. Yet the Phoenicians sailed on, navigating by the sun and stars, following coastlines and reading ocean currents to reach a land that must have seemed like the end of the earth. This Atlantic tin route was not a public trade lane, it was a closely guarded state secret. By monopolizing access to British tin, the Phoenicians could dictate terms across the ancient world, becoming the indispensable middlemen for an entire civilization's technological needs. Their network was the silent, sturdy backbone of the Bronze Age economy, a web of commerce that connected the mines of Cornwall to the palaces of Mesopotamia. This spirit of fearless exploration, of sailing into the unknown for knowledge and resources, connects the Phoenicians to another great seafaring culture, one that would push the boundaries of the possible even further, across the vast emptiness of the open Pacific. Their double-hulled canoes were not just boats, they were floating islands capable of sustaining communities for weeks on the open ocean. Without a compass or chart, these Polynesian voyagers read the world itself as their map. They memorized the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating a celestial compass that guided them across thousands of miles of empty sea. But their knowledge went far beyond the heavens. They learned to interpret the subtle patterns of ocean swells, feeling how they bent around unseen islands far beyond the horizon. They watched for specific species of birds whose flight paths at dusk would always lead back to land. They even deciphered the faint reflections of lagoons on the undersides of clouds, a phenomenon modern sailors now call sky mirroring. This was a science of wayfinding, an entire encyclopedia of environmental knowledge held in memory and passed from one master navigator to the next through chance and direct experience. This was not accidental discovery. It was a deliberate, multi-generational project of exploration and settlement that connected a vast triangle of islands, from the towering volcanoes of Hawaii to the misty fjords of New Zealand, and to the isolated shores of Rapa Nui, also known as Easter Island. This network, maintained by continuous two-way voyages, formed one of the most extensive cultural spheres on Earth, all created by a people who saw the ocean not as a barrier but as a pathway. Their story stands as a monumental achievement in human history, a testament to what is possible when knowledge and environment are in perfect harmony. It also invites a profound question. If such a sophisticated maritime network could exist in the Pacific, could similar, equally advanced systems have thrived in other oceans, their stories now lost to the depth? Alexander the Great's land conquests are legendary, but his final grand campaign hinged on a riverine fleet. After his army had pushed to the very edge of the known world in the Indian subcontinent, it was a navy, built from scratch on the Indus River, that would secure his line of retreat and expand his reach. Under his trusted Admiral Nearchus, this formidable fleet of up to 200 vessels embarked on an epic voyage. Their mission was to sail from the mouth of the Indus along the uncharted coast of the Arabian Sea, mapping the shoreline and establishing a supply route back to the heart of the Persian Empire. This was not a pleasure cruise, it was a journey into the unknown, a test of endurance against monsoon winds, treacherous reefs, and dwindling supplies. The sailors, a mix of Greeks and experienced local seamen, documented strange sea creatures and encountered coastal communities who had never before seen such ships. They succeeded against all odds in reaching the Persian Gulf, proving that maritime power could bind a vast empire together. Yet, with Alexander's sudden passing, this grand naval armada faded from history. The specific fate of most ships is a mystery, their husks likely repurposed or reclaimed by the sea, while legends grew of isolated Greek settlements left behind along the desolate Macron coast. This fleeting but powerful network shows that even the greatest land conqueror understood his empire was ultimately defined by water. That same principle of water-borne power was being perfected in a very different part of the world, where an entire civilization thrived on a high-altitude lake. These stilted villages rose from the misty waters of alpine lakes, their wooden walkways connecting clusters of homes built safely above the waterline. Known in Germany as Folberton or pile dwellings, these were the ingenious solutions of Europe's early farmers. By driving sturdy timber pilings deep into the lakebed, they created artificial islands, communities perfectly adapted to their environment. The water provided a natural moat against predators and rival groups, while the surrounding wetlands and lakes offered a rich, sustainable larder of fish, waterfowl, and edible plants. But the true magic of these sites lies in what time could not destroy. The oxygen-poor mud at the bottom of these lakes created a remarkable time capsule. Organic materials that would have rotted away on dry land were preserved in stunning detail. Archaeologists have recovered woven baskets still holding grain, delicate linen clothing, and even butter still stored in wooden containers, offering an intimate, almost living connection to the daily lives of people from thousands of years ago. Far to the northwest, a similar story was unfolding on the lochs and loughs of Ireland and Scotland. Here, people built crannogs, artificial islands constructed from layers of timber, stone, and earth. Each crannog was a personal fortress, a family homestead reached by a narrow, easily defended causeway or by canoe. The effort required was immense, a testament to the value they placed on the security and resources the water provided. These were not isolated, insular communities. The very water that surrounded them served as their highway. The discovery of polished jadate axes from the high Alps in a Scottish crannog tells a story of astonishing reach. This precious stone traveled hundreds of miles, passed from hand to hand along river routes and across coastal waters, demonstrating that these lake dwellers were nodes in a vast, interconnected web of trade. They exchanged not only goods but also technologies, artistic styles, and beliefs, their canoes carrying ideas as readily as they carried cargo. Yet, this way of life was ultimately vulnerable to the very element that sustained it. The abandonment of many of these aquatic villages appears linked to shifts in climate and rising water levels, a period of increased rainfall or a long-term trend in rising lake waters would have flooded their homes, submerging the very platforms they lived on. This recurring pattern, where water gives life and then reclaims it, echoes the fate of so many maritime cultures. The legacy of the pile dwellers and crannog builders proves that the impulse to build networks upon the water is a fundamental human strategy, one that operates on every scale, from the vastness of an ocean to the intimacy of a sheltered lake. This same brilliant adaptation to an aquatic world would be mirrored, on a much grander scale, in the floating cities of the Americas. While the lake dwellers of Europe built upon the water, another culture was being shaped by it in one of the driest places on Earth. Along the stark coastline of the Atacama Desert in Chile and Peru, the Chinchorro people thrived for millennia, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the Pacific. This was not a society of grand monuments, but of profound intimacy with the ocean. They were the world's first known mariners to practice a complex form of mummification, a tradition that began over 9,000 years ago, long before the pyramids of Egypt rose from the sands. Their entire existence was a testament to maritime adaptation. The cold, nutrient-rich Humboldt Current created an incredibly rich marine ecosystem, providing a constant and reliable bounty of fish, seabirds, and marine mammals. This abundance allowed them to establish some of the earliest known sedentary communities in the Americas, living in one place for generations because the sea provided everything they needed. It was from this stable, ocean-focused life that their unique spiritual practices emerged. The Chinchorro developed an intricate mummification process that was remarkably democratic, applied to individuals of all ages and social statuses, from the very old to the very young. The procedure was a careful, reverent act. They would delicately prepare the physical form, sometimes using natural materials like clay and reeds to reconstruct and reinforce the body before wrapping it in layers of skin and vegetable fiber. This was not merely preservation, it was a transformation, a ritual that reflected a deep belief in an afterlife and a powerful connection to their ancestors. Their network was one of culture, not commerce, connecting coastal settlements through shared beliefs and practices that were born directly from their relationship with the sea. The Chinchorro remind us that the earliest and most enduring maritime networks were not always about trade routes spanning oceans. They could be found in the shared spiritual life of a people who looked to the waves for both their physical survival and their understanding of eternity. This profound connection between a harsh landscape and a life-giving sea finds a powerful parallel in another ancient culture, one that flourished in the extreme environment of the American Southwest. The cuneiform tablets of ancient Mesopotamia speak of three distant, almost mythical lands, Dilmun, Magan, and Meluhha. These were not mere names, but the pillars of a Bronze Age maritime network that connected the world's first great civilizations. Dilmun, a place scholars associate with modern Bahrain, was the central hub, a peaceful entrepot where merchants from the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia could meet and barter far from home. From the lush Indus Valley, known as Meluhha, came exotic treasures, ivory, rare woods, and intricately carved beads. The rugged land of Magan, today's Oman, supplied the era's essential metal, copper, mined and smelted by a people famed for their seafaring prowess. This was more than a simple exchange of objects. It was a conduit for innovation, where Mesopotamian writing systems might encounter the advanced urban planning of the Indus, and where shipbuilding techniques were shared and refined across the waves. This intricate system, however, depended on a delicate balance. Around 4,000 years ago, that balance shattered. A widespread arid period is believed to have gripped the region, straining agriculture and drying up trade routes. Simultaneously, the great cities of the Indus Valley, the vital partner of Meluhha, entered a period of profound transformation, their organized urban life giving way to a more localized existence. With their trading partners in disarray and the climate turning against them, the vibrant network of Dilmun faded into silence. Its story is a powerful lesson in early globalization, revealing how the threads connecting distant cultures can be unraveled by environmental shifts and the fall of a single, crucial partner. From the interconnected world of the Persian Gulf, we now journey to a place of profound isolation, where a unique culture turned its seclusion into a breathtaking artistic legacy. The silence of the Moai is deceptive. These stone giants, standing with their backs to the endless Pacific, are not monuments to a people who gave up, but to a culture that fought for its survival against impossible odds. Reaching Rapa Nui was the ultimate Polynesian navigational triumph, a voyage to a speck of land so remote it feels like a world unto itself. Once settled, the connection to the vast voyaging network was effectively severed. No new plants, no new animals, no new ideas could arrive by sea. This was not a choice, but a geographical reality that forced a profound transformation. The prevailing story we have been told is one of ecological suicide, a society that cut down every last palm tree to move its statues, triggering a catastrophic collapse. Yet, recent discoveries are painting a far more nuanced and compelling picture of human resilience. Archaeologists have identified vast, subtle patterns across the island, intricate grids of broken rock spread across the landscape. These are not the signs of failure, but of genius, a sophisticated form of rock gardening. By carefully placing these stones, the Rapa Nui people created microclimates that protected sweet potato crops from the wind, conserved precious moisture, and enriched the soil. This was not a society blindly consuming its resources, but one actively and ingeniously engineering its environment to support a substantial population against all odds. The idea that they completely lost their seafaring knowledge is also being challenged. Evidence suggests they likely maintained small, skilled crews who braved the open ocean to hunt porpoises, a testament to their unbroken connection to the sea that had brought them there. Their world did change and hardship did come, but their story is not a simple morality tale. It is the story of a people who, when their global network vanished, turned inward and built a unique and enduring civilization from the stones beneath their feet. This incredible capacity for adaptation in isolation raises a profound question about our own interconnected world, and whether the true lesson of these lost maritime civilizations has been waiting for us all along. That slow, relentless creep of water was the single greatest driver of human migration in our history. As the great ice sheets melted, the oceans did not simply rise, they lunged forward in devastating pulses. One event, known to scientists as Meltwater Pulse 1A, saw sea levels surge by several meters within a single century. For the people living on those vast, fertile coastal plains, this was not a gradual change they could adapt to over generations. It was a fast-moving frontier of loss, swallowing entire hunting grounds and sacred places within a single human lifetime. Imagine the world map transforming before your eyes. A rich plain the size of a modern country, known today as Doggerland, slowly dissolved into the cold waters of the North Sea, forcing its inhabitants to become refugees in the hills of Britain and mainland Europe. The Bering Land Bridge, a 1,000-mile-wide corridor that had connected continents, vanished beneath the waves, forever separating the human populations of Asia and the Americas. Every coastline on Earth was in retreat, and with each high tide, more of the human story was erased. This global catastrophe left a deep scar on our collective memory. The universal flood myth, found in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical story of Noah, and in countless indigenous traditions from every corner of the globe, is almost certainly the cultural echo of this real-world event. These are not mere coincidences, but the ancestral memory of a time when the world was literally remade by water, when communities were scattered and the very shape of the land was forever changed. This understanding transforms the search for lost civilizations from a fringe pursuit into a serious scientific endeavor. We are not looking for mythic continents that sank overnight, but for the very real, drowned landscapes where our ancestors once thrived. The next great discoveries in human history will not be made in dusty deserts, but on the submerged continental shelves, waiting for our technology to finally read their stories. Sonar waves pierced the murky waters of the Gulf of Khambhat, painting a ghostly image of a city that should not exist. The scans revealed a sprawling, geometric grid, a pattern of straight lines and right angles that stretched across the seabed, complete with what looked like the outlines of large structures and complex drainage channels. This was not a random collection of rocks, it was the blueprint of a lost metropolis. When dredging brought up artifacts from the silt, including weathered pottery and fragments of human activity, the carbon dating sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The results suggested this site was active as early as 7,500 years before the Common Era. If this dating holds, it would place a sophisticated settlement here thousands of years before the great cities of the Indus Valley emerged, a contemporary of the lost world of Sundaland. Such a claim is, of course, met with intense scrutiny. Skeptics propose that powerful tidal currents could have scoured the seabed into deceptively artificial shapes, and they question whether the recovered materials might have been displaced from later periods. Yet the possibility remains tantalizing. Here, in these silent underwater ruins, could lie the evidence of a major Neolithic society, a coastal civilization that thrived at the very dawn of agriculture and was slowly inundated by the post-glacial rising oceans. The fierce debate surrounding the Gulf of Khambhat is not a weakness of the field, but a demonstration of its strength, showing how historical science rigorously tests every extraordinary claim. It represents the new frontier of discovery, where the next great chapter of our story lies submerged, waiting for its truth to be carefully unearthed. From these warm, debated waters, our search for lost lands leads to a much colder and darker sea, where the bones of an entire country are buried beneath the waves. The floor of the North Sea holds the ghost of a continent. For thousands of years, a vast, low-lying plain known as Doggerland stretched from the eastern coast of Britain all the way to the Netherlands and Denmark. This was no barren tundra, but a fertile heartland of hills, forests, and meandering rivers, teeming with red deer, aurochs, and other game. Mesolithic communities thrived here, following the seasonal migrations and drawing a rich livelihood from the land and its abundant waterways. Their world was a connected one, a place where one could walk from what is now London to Copenhagen. Then the waters came. As the glaciers melted, the sea began its slow, inexorable advance, turning dense woodland into salt marsh and then into shallow lagoons. Doggerland shrank for generations, its people retreating step by step as their ancestral hunting grounds vanished beneath the waves. The final chapter may have been written by a single, catastrophic event. Around 6,150 years before the Common Era, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, is believed to have triggered a devastating tsunami. A wall of water would have slammed into the remaining low-lying islands, scouring the landscape and delivering a final, brutal blow to a world already in its twilight. For centuries, North Sea fishermen have hauled up more than just fish in their nets. They have recovered the bones of mammoths and lions, and stone tools crafted by human hands, silent proof of the world that lies beneath their boats. The story of Doggerland is a humbling lesson in geography, reminding us that the coastlines we take for permanent are only a temporary snapshot in time. This lost land was not an isolated tragedy, but a single, powerful example of a global phenomenon, the drowning of countless coastal settlements that reshaped human history and scattered our ancestors across the globe. From this sunken European plain, our search leads to a legendary island whose name alone evokes mystery. The Canary Islands rise from the Atlantic like ancient fortresses, their cliffs standing guard over a deep and enduring mystery. Here, the Guanche people built a unique society in complete isolation, a culture with origins that seem to contradict its reality. Genetically, they were Berbers from North Africa, yet when European explorers arrived in the 1400s, they found a Neolithic society with no seafaring vessels capable of crossing the 100-kilometer channel that separated them from the mainland. They had no memory of the open ocean. This presents one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. How did a North African people arrive on these islands, only to forget the sea entirely? The most compelling theory suggests they were ferried by a more advanced maritime power, perhaps Phoenician traders or even a Roman expedition, who left a small group on the shore as a settlement or outpost. Cut off from resupply and contact, the knowledge of shipbuilding and navigation faded over generations, becoming a lost art. Another possibility points to a much earlier arrival, during an ancient period of lower sea levels when the island chain may have been visible from the African coast, encouraging a one-time migration that later became impossible to repeat. Once stranded, the Guanches adapted brilliantly to their volcanic archipelago. They developed a complex social structure, created a unique form of whistled language to communicate across deep ravines, and mummified their honored dead with techniques that eerily paralleled those of ancient Egypt, a culture they had never known. Their story is a profound lesson in how a people can be defined by the sea that brought them, yet become a landlocked civilization, their maritime past erased by time and isolation. This theme of a severed connection echoes far beyond the Atlantic, leading us to a lost world in the Pacific where another isolated culture left behind a silent, stone testament to its own unique journey. The floor of the Black Sea holds a secret coastline, one that was dry land over 7,000 years ago. Before the Great Flood, this was a vast freshwater lake, its shores lapping at settlements that now rest hundreds of feet below the surface. Then, around 5,600 before the Common Era, the Mediterranean Sea, swollen from melting glaciers, pushed through a natural dam at the Bosporus Strait. What happened next is a subject of intense scientific debate, but the theory suggests a cataclysmic transformation. A torrent of salt water thundered into the basin, a waterfall hundreds of times more powerful than Niagara Falls, filling the low-lying plains at an astonishing rate. An estimated 100,000 square kilometers of inhabited land vanished beneath the waves, a loss that would have unfolded over months or years, not days, but with a speed that was utterly generational. The world those people knew was erased, its fertile valleys and river deltas replaced by a rising, lifeless sea. Modern sonar surveys have mapped this drowned world in stunning detail, revealing the ghostly contours of ancient riverbeds and what appear to be the foundations of structures on the submerged shelf. While the single catastrophic deluge is debated, the core truth is undeniable. A massive flooding event reshaped this region and the human communities living there. For the people who witnessed their world dissolving, this would have been the defining event of their era, a trauma so profound its story was carried by refugees in all directions. This regional catastrophe offers a compelling historical anchor for the great flood myths that appear across cultures. The Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, with its story of a hero building a boat to survive a world-ending flood, and the later biblical narrative of Noah, could be distant but powerful echoes of this real event, a local disaster that grew into a universal legend. The Black Sea floor is more than an archaeological site. It is a preserved landscape of human memory, a direct link to a time when environmental change rewrote our history and our deepest stories. This pattern of a world lost to the waves continues to challenge our understanding, leading us to the greatest enigma of all, a city whose legend has captivated humanity for millennia. The stone faces of Angkor Wat gaze serenely inland, but the true genius of the Khmer Empire flowed through the earth beneath them. While remembered for its breathtaking temples, this powerhouse of Southeast Asia was engineered by water. At the heart of its success lay the barrays, immense man-made reservoirs that transformed the landscape. The largest of these, the West Barray, is a staggering 8 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, an artificial inland sea built with astonishing precision. This was far more than a simple source for irrigation and drinking water. It was the central node in a hydraulic marvel, a sprawling network of canals, dikes, and moats that acted as the empire's circulatory system. These waterways became a bustling inland maritime network where fleets of barges and canoes moved not just water, but the very lifeblood of the kingdom. Heavy sandstone blocks for temple construction, essential rice harvests, and trade goods from distant provinces all traveled these liquid highways. This system connected the capital to the Tonle Sap Lake, a naturally pulsing freshwater body, and from there to the mighty Mekong River. That connection opened a trade route stretching to the South China Sea, integrating anchor into a wider world of commerce. This mastery of hydrology was also the source of the empire's political power, enabling a centralized authority to distribute resources and administer a vast territory from the heart of the capital. Yet this brilliance contained a profound vulnerability. The empire's eventual decline is linked to a faltering in this very system. Periods of intense monsoon rains, followed by severe droughts, appear to have overwhelmed the delicate balance of the water network. Canals silted up, and the meticulously managed flow of water broke down, suggesting that the environmental changes of the era ultimately challenged even this most advanced hydraulic society. The story of the Khmer reminds us that maritime networks are human creations, as dependent on careful maintenance as they are on grand vision. To understand how such visions were pursued across the open ocean, we must look to the fundamental tools that made global exploration possible. These ancient navigators did not conquer the ocean with force, but with an intimate, living knowledge of its rhythms. For the Polynesian Wayfinders, the night sky was a vast, rotating map. They did not simply follow a single star, but memorized the precise points on the horizon where hundreds of stars would rise and set, creating a mental star compass that divided the entire circle of the sea. A master navigator would know that sailing toward the rising point of one specific star would lead to a particular island chain, while another star's setting point marked a different destination. This celestial knowledge was a sacred science preserved in chants and taught through years of apprenticeship on the open water. Far to the north, the Vikings faced a different challenge, navigating under often overcast skies. They relied on a sun compass, a wooden disc that cast a shadow from a central gnomon to indicate direction. Legend also speaks of the sunstone, a crystal-like Iceland spar that could polarize light, allowing a skilled user to locate the position of the sun even through dense cloud cover. This was not magic, but a profound application of natural physics, perhaps the most abstract and beautiful system developed in the Marshall Islands, where navigators constructed intricate stick charts from palm ribs and cowrie shells. These were not literal maps of islands, but diagrams of the ocean's energy. The sticks represented the patterns of swells and currents, how they bent and reflected around distant atolls. A navigator would learn to feel these subtle shifts in the water's movement through the hull of his canoe, reading the waves as clearly as a modern sailor reads a digital screen. This deep, experiential wisdom was a civilization's most precious asset, a form of intellectual property meticulously guarded and passed from one generation to the next. Its gradual loss as colonial influence and modern instruments spread meant the silencing of a unique dialogue between humanity and the natural world. These techniques were the invisible, living infrastructure that made the global maritime network possible, the silent language of the sea. Our final journey takes us to a culture that turned this intimate environmental knowledge into a way of life, thriving in one of the planet's most demanding aquatic landscapes. Their story is one of humanity's most breathtaking journeys across the roof of the world. In a remarkably short span of time, the Thule ancestors of the Inuit launched from the coast of Alaska and spread eastward, their voyage a rapid colonization of the entire North American Arctic all the way to Greenland. This was not a slow drift of people, but a purposeful migration across thousands of miles of the planet's most unforgiving terrain. The secret to their success was not just endurance, but a complete mastery of the frozen sea. They were architects of the Arctic maritime world, building two distinct vessels that served as their lifelines. The Umiak was their moving van, a large, open boat skinned with walrus hide, capable of carrying entire families, their dogs, and all their worldly possessions across open leads of water. Its smaller, more agile counterpart was the kayak, a sleek, covered hunting craft that allowed a single paddler to move in near silence, becoming one with the water to approach wary prey. Their technological genius extended to the hunt itself. They crafted the toggling harpoon, a revolutionary tool whose head would twist and lock inside a whale or seal's body, preventing it from pulling free. This invention allowed them to reliably harvest the ocean's largest mammals, turning the mighty bowhead whale into a mountain of resources, from blubber for oil and heat to bone for tools and shelter frames. Drawn by the pursuit of these whales, and possibly aided by a period of warmer climate that opened up sea routes, the Thule wove a living network across the top of the globe. They did not just survive, they built a civilization connected by ice and water, trading prized goods like iron from rare meteorites and carved soapstone lamps across staggering distances. Their legacy is a powerful testament to human ingenuity, proving that where there is a sea, no matter how frozen, humanity will find a way to build a network upon it. As our voyage through these lost maritime worlds draws to a close, what final wisdom do their silent stories hold for our own interconnected age? These scattered civilizations, from the Minoans to the Thule, were not lost islands of history. They were luminous points in a single, sprawling constellation, a global web of human connection woven by the sea. The ocean was our first true world-wide web, a liquid highway that carried not just goods, but ideas, technologies, and entire populations across the planet. This network was driven by a powerful rhythm, the push and pull of necessity and opportunity. The search for vital resources like copper, tin, and spices opened trade routes that spanned continents. The spirit of exploration and the search for new lands propelled canoes across the empty Pacific and Viking longships across the stormy Atlantic. And always in the background was the relentless pressure of a changing environment, with rising sea levels constantly redrawing the map of the habitable world. The disappearance of these cultures so often happened at a fragile junction, a moment when a major environmental shift, like a volcanic eruption or a prolonged drought, met a society that had become dependent on a specific and vulnerable system. Their maritime brilliance, the very source of their power, could become their greatest liability when the seas turned against them. What unites them all are the common threads of innovation: the creation of the outrigger canoe, the toggling harpoon, the celestial compass, technologies born from an intimate dialogue with the water. We see the establishment of far-flung trade routes, from the Phoenician tin run to Britain to the Olmec's riverine exchange of jade, and we witness the deep cultural impact of the sea, how it shaped their spiritual beliefs, their social structures, and their very identity. When we view history through this lens, the story of humanity shifts. It is no longer a series of isolated events on solid ground, but a fluid, interconnected narrative of movement and exchange. Our past is not primarily a chronicle of land empires, but a saga of blue highways. This perspective is far more than an academic exercise. In a world where our own coastlines are becoming increasingly vulnerable, the lessons from these lost networks are more urgent than ever. Their stories are a silent testament to both the creative power of our relationship with the sea and the profound consequences when that relationship falls out of balance. Our journey across these sunken worlds reveals a profound truth. that human history is not a series of isolated events, but a single, fluid story written across the seas. We have sailed with the Minoan traders and the Polynesian Wayfinders, witnessing how their maritime highways carried more than just cargo. They transported entire cultures, technologies, and beliefs from one shore to another. This ancient web of connection was the true engine of progress, a global network thriving millennia before our modern age. Yet this brilliance was always balanced on a knife's edge. The same oceans that offered pathways to prosperity could also deliver profound change, as the slow drowning of Doggerland and the lost continent of Sundaland so powerfully reminds us. The disappearance of these civilizations is not a collection of random tragedies, but a recurring theme in the human epic, a lesson in how environmental shifts can redefine the map of our world. These stories are far from mere footnotes. They are essential chapters that teach us about resilience in the face of overwhelming forces and the incredible capacity for innovation when communities are challenged. In our own time, as the planet's climate shifts and coastlines once again begin to transform, the silent testimony of these lost worlds carries a new and urgent relevance. Their fate invites us to look at our own global connections and consider their durability. What other hidden histories lie preserved in the deep, waiting for their stories to be recovered? The network is still there, a submerged museum of human achievement, patiently awaiting the next generation of explorers. We would love to hear which of these lost maritime civilizations you find most compelling. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to join us as we continue exploring history's greatest mysteries.